August 14, 2003, began as an unremarkable day across the northeastern United States and parts of Canada. The summer heat pushed power grids to their limits as air conditioners hummed in millions of homes and businesses. In the control rooms of First Energy Corporation in Ohio, operators watched their monitors, managing the flow of electricity across an intricate web of transmission lines that served 50 million people. No one could have predicted that within hours, this ordinary Thursday would transform into the largest power outage in North American history. At 12:15 p.m., a software bug silently activated in the alarm system at First Energy's control center in Akron, Ohio. The bug, a race condition in the software, caused the system's primary alarm function to fail. But the most terrifying aspect? No one noticed. The operators continued working, believing their monitoring systems were functioning perfectly. For the next hour, as power lines began to fail due to contact with overgrown trees, no alarms sounded, no warnings flashed. The digital eyes that were supposed to alert humans to danger had gone blind. The first domino had fallen, but in complete silence. By 2:14 p.m., several high-voltage power lines in northern Ohio had failed, the transmissions sagging in the summer heat until they touched trees that should have been trimmed back. Each line that failed placed more stress on the remaining grid. Inside First Energy's control room, operators remained oblivious. Their computer screens showed outdated information. Their alarm systems stayed silent. When neighboring power authorities called to warn of unusual power fluctuations, First Energy's staff had no idea anything was wrong with their own systems. At 3:05 p.m., the situation reached a critical tipping point. Power lines continued to fail across Ohio. Instead of flowing through its intended paths, electricity began seeking alternative routes through the grid. Like a river suddenly diverted, flooding areas never meant to handle such volume. In control rooms across the Northeast, engineers watched in disbelief as power flows began behaving in ways they'd never seen before. Massive amounts of electricity suddenly surged through transmission lines never designed to handle such loads. By 3:17 p.m., a mathematical threshold was crossed, a point of no return in the complex equations that govern electrical grids. Within power stations, generators that had been humming steadily for years began to spin out of synchronization. At precisely 4:10 p.m., the cascade became unstoppable. Like a row of dominoes, systems began to fail across 8 U.S. states and the Canadian province of Ontario. Cleveland and Toledo went dark first. Within seconds, Detroit lost power. Toronto's lights extinguished moments later. By 4:13 p.m., New York City fell silent. In just 3 minutes, 256 power plants shut down. 50 million people lost electricity. The speed was unprecedented, a technological failure moving at the pace of light itself through wires connecting communities across 2 countries. In New York City, the effects were immediate and terrifying. At 4:13 p.m., as subway trains were packed with early commuters, 413 trains stopped between stations, trapping 400,000 passengers underground. Elevators froze in skyscrapers, stranding thousands. Traffic lights went dark at 11,600 intersections. Water pressure failed as pumps shut down. Cell phone networks collapsed within hours as backup batteries drained. ATMs ceased functioning, leaving people without access to cash. Hospitals switched to emergency generators, praying they would hold. Jennifer Moss, a nurse working at NYU Medical Center that day, later recalled, "We were in the middle of a delicate procedure when everything went black. For 2 seconds, there was complete silence. Then our backup generators kicked in. Those 2 seconds felt like an eternity, knowing a patient's life hung in the balance of whether that generator would start." As night fell, the true scope of the disaster became clear. 50 million people, more than the entire population of Spain, were without power in an increasingly technological society where nearly everything depended on electricity. The stories that emerged revealed both the vulnerability and resilience of modern civilization. In Cleveland, water pressure dropped so severely that officials advised boiling water, advice that was useless for those with electric stoves. In Toronto, people directed traffic at major intersections, creating spontaneous order from chaos. In Detroit, residents brought refrigerated food to communal grills, cooking together what would otherwise spoil. In New York, strangers helped the elderly down countless flights of stairs in darkened high-rises. Perhaps most remarkably, in a city often characterized by its harshness, New Yorkers came together. Crime rates actually dropped. Neighbors who had never spoken shared candles and batteries. Impromptu block parties formed as people brought melting ice cream into the streets to share. As night fell, satellite images revealed the extraordinary scope of the blackout, a massive dark patch covering much of the northeastern United States and eastern Canada, visible from space. In areas accustomed to perpetual illumination, people looked up and saw stars for the first time in years as light pollution temporarily vanished. But the darkness brought dangers too. Hospitals reported increased admissions for heat stroke as air conditioning failed. Carbon monoxide poisoning cases spiked from improper generator use. Water contamination became a serious concern as treatment plants lost power, food worth millions of dollars spoiled in warming freezers. As engineers worked desperately to restore power, investigators began the painstaking process of understanding what had gone wrong. They faced a daunting challenge, reconstructing a cascade of failures that had occurred at nearly the speed of light through an interconnected system spanning thousands of miles. What they discovered was profoundly unsettling. The largest power outage in North American history had been triggered by a software bug, a few lines of faulty code, combined with untrimmed trees and human error. The timeline they reconstructed revealed how technologically dependent modern society had become. A software bug silenced alarms. Operators, blind to developing problems, took no action. Overloaded transmission lines sagged into trees. Power rerouted automatically through remaining lines. Those lines became overloaded. Automatic safeguards triggered shutdowns. Each shutdown forced more power through fewer lines. A cascading failure became mathematically inevitable. Stephen Johnson, one of the investigators, later wrote, "What we found most disturbing was not that the system failed, but how quickly it failed. The time between everything is normal and catastrophic collapse was measured in minutes, not hours. That's what keeps me up at night." Bringing the power back was not as simple as flipping a switch. Large power plants take days to restart safely. The grid had to be carefully rebalanced. Priorities had to be established. Hospitals first, then water treatment facilities, then other critical infrastructure. For some, power returned within hours. For others, it took days. 90% of power was restored in New York by August 15th. Cleveland fully recovered by August 16th. Parts of Ontario remained without electricity until August 18th. The economic impact was staggering. Estimates ranged from $4 billion to $10 billion in lost productivity, spoiled food, and emergency services. In the months that followed, investigations revealed a disturbing pattern of inadequate maintenance, insufficient investment in infrastructure, and flawed software design. The North American Electric Reliability Council identified three primary causes. First, energy's failure to trim trees near transmission lines, inadequate system understanding by operators, failure of computerized alarm systems. Perhaps most alarming was the realization that the entire disaster could have been prevented if any one of these factors had been addressed. It wasn't a perfect storm of unrelated events. It was a cascading failure where each vulnerability exposed the next. The 2003 blackout exposed critical vulnerabilities in the systems that power modern life. In response, New mandatory reliability standards were established. Grid operators implemented better training. Software systems were redesigned with redundancies. Yet experts warn that our increasing dependence on technology creates new vulnerabilities faster than we can address them. Power grids are increasingly computerized, creating more potential points of failure. Cyber attacks targeting infrastructure have grown more sophisticated. Climate change produces more extreme weather that threatens physical infrastructure. The grid is increasingly complex, making it harder for humans to understand. Dr. Meredith Hansen, a power systems expert who helped redesign safeguards after the 2003 blackout, offers this sobering assessment. We've made genuine improvements, but the uncomfortable truth is that as systems grow more complex, they develop new and often invisible vulnerabilities. The next major failure won't look like the last one. It never does. What makes the 2003 blackout so deeply unsettling is not just its scale, but what it reveals about our modern existence. When the lights went out for 50 million people, it exposed how tenuous our technological society really is, how a few lines of faulty code can cascade into a disaster affecting millions. Consider what would happen today, nearly 2 decades later, when our dependence on technology has only deepened. Medical devices increasingly rely on connectivity. Banking exists primarily in digital form. Food distribution depends on just-in-time computerized logistics. Communication happens almost exclusively through powered devices. Work and education require constant internet access. The 2003 blackout lasted days. Imagine if it had lasted weeks. As you read this on your powered device, consider that somewhere in the millions of lines of code that control our critical infrastructure, other phantoms may be lurking. Invisible errors waiting for the precise conditions to trigger another cascade. The most terrifying aspect of the 2003 blackout isn't what happened. It's that it could happen again at any moment, perhaps on an even larger scale, and we might never see it coming until the screens go dark. The real horror isn't the darkness itself. It's how much we've forgotten how to live without the light.